It seems each year we get more and more sequels, and 2025 was definitely not short of movie sequels. Hi, my name's Zach, and today I'm going to give you my ranking for every sequel I watched in 2025.
Cause let's face it, baby, these days, you gotta have a sequel!
Before we get started, I started this YouTube channel because I cannot watch a movie without needing to talk about it afterwards. If that sounds like you're in the right place. Consider hitting that subscribe button. Also, this is going to be a part one of a 4-part series of ranking lists going to the end of the year. Tomorrow, we're going to cover the most disappointing films of the year. We're going to do the worst movies of the year, and we're going to end it with the best movies, in my opinion, of the year. And definitely join me down below in the comment section with your list. What were your favorite sequels that you watched this year? And with all that said, let's get started. In last place is Happy Gilmore 2 for me. I love Happy Gilmore. It's my favorite Adam Sandler movie. Favorite Adam Sandler comedy, I should say. I watch it at least once a year. It's endlessly quotable in my household. And I was really nervous for Happy Gilmore 2 because long delayed comedy sequels have a horrible track record. And unfortunately, Happy Gilmore 2 did not succeed, surpassing my expectations. It didn't even meet them. It was worse than I thought it would be. I really disliked this movie. I thought that they completely missed the heart of Happy Gilmore. I think the character of Happy Gilmore that Adam Sandler plays works better in his 30s than it does in his almost 60s. I thought the movie was full of just poor and unlikable decisions where you kill off his wife, you make him a drunk who's hiding alcohol around the place for a joke. All the jokes in this I found completely lazy, where they just have celebrity cameos come in here and then they have to flash back to the first film because each celebrity is like playing a descendant from a character in the first film. So it wasn't a funny comedy. It wasn't a great legacy sequel. It just wasn't a good movie in general. It's my least favorite by far of the sequels I watched all year because I love that first one so much, and this just really tarnished it for me. Number 21, Paddington Goes to Peru. And this is lower on the list because it is kind of ridiculous to get mad about a movie that is essentially aimed for kids. But the reality is that the first two Paddington films were able to surpass just being kids and family films because of what Paul King brought to the franchise as the director. So much charm, so much heart, that it was able to break through just being a kid's film and was able to be accessible to everybody. Paddington Goes to Peru did not have Paul King returning, thus this does feel more like a generic kind of kids family movie. It still has some charm, it still has some wit, but the absence of Paul King was felt by me. It does not live up to the first two films. Not that those films are easy to live up to, and I wasn't expecting this to fully live up to them, but it was such a downgrade for me where I did just kind of feel like I was watching something that was not meant for me. So unfortunately, Paddington does not turn out to be one of the greatest trilogies of all time, in my opinion, because Paddington Goes to Peru just kind of fell off, went back to being a generic kids film. Kicking off our top 20, Karate Kid Legends. Man, was this movie disappointing. I loved Cobra Kai. I thought the legacy sequel that they did with Johnny and with Daniel, and also introducing this new generation of Karate Kids, was done to near perfection with Cobra Kai. With the series ending and then going into a new Karate Kid movie where they bring back Daniel, they bring back Jackie Chan from the Karate Kid 2010 remake. Such a wacky idea to begin with. And they delivered such a lackluster experience where they kind of just play the beats of what we've seen in past Karate Kids before. And then they get into this weird subplot of this pizza owner who's boxing, and the Karate Kid is teaching him how to use karate for his boxing routine, which was one of the more fascinating aspects of the film. But then they quickly divert away from that to do another kind of safe, generic Karate Kid film that you've seen time and time again. Daniel and Jackie Chan don't come in until like the last third of the movie. They really don't have much to do at all. They're just there for cameo sake. They're just there for nostalgia's sake. And it's painstakingly obvious when you get to the finale. It's not that this is an unwatchable film. It's just such a gross attempt at doing nostalgia bait for the sake of nostalgia bait without having too many creative forces behind it. Ben Wong is great as the Karate Kid. I liked the performances. It just felt like such a nothing movie to me. Number 19, Captain America, Brave New World. Surface level, this is a watchable and entertaining time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Got some fun action. I like the characters. I like Sam Wilson. I like seeing where characters from the Incredible Hulk are now, like 15 years later. But this being the first outing for Sam Wilson's Captain America, this story really lets his character down. It doesn't really let him shine. It doesn't really give him much to do because they just wedge him in to an Incredible Hulk sequel where it's more focused on Thunderbolt Ross and the leader's relationship because of the scorn that the leader has for Thunderbolt Ross of how he's been treated over these last 15 years. Sam Wilson doesn't even really get that much involvement in the story. He's kind of a background character within the story playing out. It's fun to see Red Hulk, but some of the green screen was painstakingly obvious. This movie was clearly reshot and reworked many, many different times. Characters come in and out of the movie, some of them leaving for long periods of time, some of which don't even return. It's a mess, but it's an entertaining enough mess. 18, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Now, this is a franchise that I got into for the first time this year. I watched all 3 of the previous movies leading up to this one. Not a huge fan of the franchise, but what I liked about this is when it was being more of a reboot, more of a remake of the movie. I liked the characters. I liked the teenage characters specifically. Having Freddie Prinze Jr. and Jennifer Love Hewitt come back into the picture was fun to see familiar faces. I didn't really like what they had to do within the story. And I really didn't like the reveal, the big twist. Who was the fisherman this time around? For me, it didn't work at all. It felt forced. It felt out of character. The reasoning they gave, I thought was really stupid. So it just kind of misses the whole point of the franchise. It brings back legacy characters and kind of tarnishes a lot of their legacy. It had redeeming moments and things that I liked about it, but the overall package was kind of a letdown. Speaking of letdowns, Jurassic World Rebirth. This is a franchise that I've had a lot of trouble liking since the first Jurassic World movie. Love Jurassic Park, one of my favorite movies of all time, like many of you. But this franchise has just gotten dumber and dumber and dumber and worse and worse and worse as it's gone on. I was hoping that Gareth Edwards was going to be able to bring this back to form with this movie, and to me, he just played it too safe. The characters weren't that interesting. They were carbon copies of characters we've seen before, so one-note characters. The dinosaur action, even in this, which Gareth Edwards is known for doing big scope and size with the Godzilla films and working on a contained budget CGI-wise when it comes to movies like The Creator, and it just felt like there was a lack of passion behind this film, which is odd because everyone behind the scenes involved with this film claims that they were so passionate about the project, about Jurassic Park. And I don't like how they keep going further with the mutations of the dinosaurs to the point in this film. They might as well just be facing off against aliens. Even the dinosaur action sequences in this film were very lacking. And when they did pop up, they weren't as exciting or thrilling as I wanted them to be. That it was just really boring. I couldn't really get into the story, couldn't get into the characters, and the dinosaur action that I was there to see was pretty lackluster. 16, Megan 2.0. Now this franchise went in a completely different direction from where it started, where the first Megan was kind of entry-level horror. This goes full wacky Looney Tunes action film where it's so over the top, it's so heightened, it is unrecognizable from where it started in the first film, which if you were a fan of Megan for the horror, you're going to be disappointed by that. Myself, I found enough enjoyment in it. I thought the action was kind of fun. I bought into the wackiness and silliness of it. Megan, in and of herself, as soon as she did that TikTok dance in the first film, this is kind of the direction I saw the character going in. Maybe not to this extent, but I feel like she served this movie almost better than she did in her first movie. The unfortunate thing about this movie is it's got a really dumb plot. It's got a really generic plot. It's got a lot of things we've seen before in other better sci-fi movies, sci-fi action movies, but it's watchable. And I did have some fun watching it. And Megan, I did still like the character of Megan. I liked the characters in this world. It's just a completely different world than what we last saw them in. And in some cases, it's a worse world for it, but I didn't mind it. 15, The Black Phone 2. I was pleasantly surprised by the first Black Phone. I liked that it was a survival film. I liked that it was a more grounded and contained film, but had a supernatural element included within it with the kids and the phone. Black Phone 2, I was always nervous about because inevitably, because they killed off the grabber at the end of the first film, they were going to have to dive deeper into the supernatural elements and aspects of the story to bring him back. And that's exactly what they do here. And it just makes the whole idea a little less interesting to me. There are some fun sequences. It's a lot gorier. It's a lot more violent than the first film is. But everything that they do with going into the grabber's origins, I thought was just contrived and kind of lazy. This feels like Scott Derrickson's audition to do a Freddy movie, a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, where he basically just turns the grabber into Freddy Krueger. That does lead to some fun sequences, some fun dream sequences, but the way that he transitions into the dream sequences with the Super 8 film, it makes it very obvious when we're in a dream sequence, kind of takes away the tension, kind of takes away the suspense. All the returning characters are great. Mason Thames is great once again in here. Ethan Hawke is great as the grabber once again in here. But it does feel like a story that was supposed to end at the first film that they're now stretching out to make a franchise. And I can feel that stretching out. It feels like the band is about to break with how much they're trying to stretch it out. And it just didn't fully work for me. 14, Wicked for Good. I've never seen the play. I've never seen the Broadway play of Wicked. But I did go see the first Wicked in theaters last year. And I loved it, fell in love with it, thought that it was a grand production, was so into the characters of Elphaba and Glinda and their relationship, the way that they played off of the Wizard of Oz elements of the story and did something different and new with it. I was very excited to go into Wicked for Good, and I walked out pretty let down by the film. I felt like a lot of the magic that was in the first part was completely missing, with Elphaba and Glinda being separated for the majority of the movie. And because they added the elements of the Wizard of Oz story with Dorothy and the Scarecrow and the Tin Man into the movie, it felt like they had to betray characters that we were following from the first film, and they had to contrive storylines to make the Wizard of Oz story happen in the background. And characters are acting in ways that they otherwise wouldn't, so that the story in the Wizard of Oz can still play out the way that it's supposed to. By adding the classic Wizard of Oz story into this film, it feels like it took away and detracted from the story that they were telling from the first part. Apparently, this movie plays out exactly how the second half of the play plays out, which going into this movie, I was told that the second part of the play is the weakest part of the play. And if this is how the play does play out, yeah, this is definitely the weaker part of the play, because this is the weaker part of the two parts, and it's a very dissatisfying finale in my opinion. 13, Nobody 2, and this is where we're going to start to get a little bit more positive when it comes to ranking these sequels, because I really enjoyed the first Nobody from the people that did John Wick, and it shows. It's basically a John Wick ripoff. When they were going to do a sequel with Nobody, I was curious to see the direction they were going to go in, and then it was kind of revealed it was going to be like National Lampoon's Vacation, but with the John Wick skin on it with Nobody. And for the most part, it did work for me, because Bob Odenkirk is still great as this character. It's fun to see him do the action sequences. The choreography is still great. It plays a little bit like an episode of The Week for the Nobody series, where he goes on vacation with his family, gets involved with the drug cartel there, and gets mixed up and all that. The villain in this I thought was very weak. She doesn't even show up until like the last half hour of the film. Very underdeveloped. The conflict there isn't very interesting. It's nowhere near as good as the first film was, but it still has some really fun action. And as an action movie, that's really all I was looking for out of Nobody 2, was Bob Odenkirk kicking butt with good choreography. And I got that for the most part, just with a lesser story than the first part had, and even repeating some beats in a lesser way that the first part did. 12, Wallace and Gromit. This is a franchise I've never really been into. I never really watched. I saw Curse of the Were-Rabbit like couple of years back. That was my only exposure to Wallace and Gromit. So going into Vengeance of Fowl, I just kind of put it on for the sake of watching something in 2025, and I was charmed by it. I thought that it was really fun. It was witty, it was clever, had some great humor, had some great sight gags, and the way that Wallace and Gromit play off of each other, they're a great duo. I can see why they've lasted all of these years. And it was just a movie that, especially at the start of 2025, was a good way to just kind of get into the movie scene where it's just fun. It's not there to do anything crazy, but have a good time. I like the British humor of it all, so I had a really good time watching Wallace and Gromit Fowl of Vengeance. And if going into Wallace and Gromit Fowl of Vengeance, I would say I'm not a Wallace and Gromit fan. Coming out of the film, I would say I am. 11, Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. I have become a bigger and bigger fan of Dead Reckoning Part 1 the more that I have watched it. It's actually climbed up into being one of my favorite of the Mission Impossible series. So I was really looking forward to seeing how they were going to pull off the finale to not just Dead Reckoning, but also to this franchise as a whole. And to me, it came together pretty clumsy. Of course, the movie still delivers what you come to these movies for ultimately, which is Tom Cruise doing some pretty amazing stunts. The whole submarine sequence that he did had me on the edge of my seat, holding my breath along with him. It was a very riveting scene. And then the whole airplane sequence at the end with him and Gabriel jumping from plane to plane was also very exciting, and it was what I expect to get from a Mission Impossible film. But what I don't expect to get from Mission Impossible film is a story that's as cluttered and as convoluted as this film was, where it does feel like they just had so much material, so much to chop up in the editing bay, that they just kind of lost the focus of the story by trying to include so much in this movie. Where in Dead Reckoning, they kind of set up that Gabriel has this past with Tom Cruise. That kind of set Tom Cruise on his path into the Mission Impossible force, and they don't really expand on that. Gabriel, to me, is one of the weakest villains in the Mission Impossible series, and they've kind of built him up in the last two films to be this series Thanos, so to speak, and he just never feels like he lives up to that potential. Even the AI stuff that they're doing in the two parts here, it never really fully gelled for me. It never really felt like it belonged in a Mission Impossible film. So while it does have the stunts and the big, huge action sequences that I've come to expect from this franchise that I enjoy watching and that I did enjoy watching, the story this time around kind of let me down, and it did feel like both Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie bit off more than they could chew with this one. Number 10, Predator Killer of Killers. This is a Dan Trachtenberg film in animated form, again expanding the Predator universe, coming off of Prey, and this time around it's an anthology film. We get to see the Predator go to various times in history of Earth to take on new foes. We get him in Japan taking on samurai. We get him in World War II taking on some air pilots, and it was just a really fun and creative way to allow us to see the Predators in the way that we've always kind of wanted to see them in the fandom, in other places, not just in the jungle, not just in modern day, but across time. And to use the medium of animation to succeed in doing that and keeping it R-rated, keeping it bloody, having some great violence and action for the Predator in this format was a ton of fun. It was a great expansion of the universe. I just really like what Dan Trachtenberg is doing with the Predator franchise, and we are not done talking about that on this list. Number 9, Ballerina. This is the spin-off of the John Wick universe, but it still has John Wick within it, with Ana de Armas as the lead. And this was just a fun revisit of the John Wick world, where it takes place in between 3 and 4. So we get Keanu Reeves' character pop up in there in a fun cameo. But honestly, even before he showed up, I was really enjoying what Ana de Armas was bringing to the character and to this world. The action has not skipped a beat. It's still a ton of fun. It's high energy. It's high octane energy. And it doesn't stop. It's just a non-stop action ride from beginning to end. The story's a little bit generic of her going after revenge for a death of a family member and all that kind of stuff. You've seen it before, but to see it play out in the John Wick universe is still a ton of fun. Ana de Armas absolutely killed it in the role. There was some really creative action sequences, one in which involved a gunfight with flamethrowers that completely blew my mind. They continue to innovate and they continue to try and do new things with the action in the John Wick world. And I like that Ballerina continued that tradition with this film. And it's unfortunate that it didn't do very well at the box office compared to the other John Wick films, because I would love to see more from this cast, from Ana de Armas, and in the world of Ballerina, in the world of John Wick. Number 8, Final Destination Bloodlines. This is once again another franchise that I watched for the first time in October. I watched through all of the Final Destination films leading up to Bloodlines. And what I liked about Bloodlines is it took the formula that is kind of played out in the Final Destination films and it reconfigured them. It kept the template, but it switched things up to where now you have a whole family that is being affected by death, and it's not just random people that escaped one situation. It's this family, and the whole family dynamic and the core family element of this film is what made it stand out for me amongst Final Destination films, on top of having some really fun and creative death sequences where I actually cared about the characters this time around, whereas opposed to like just waiting for the carnage to begin. I was actually kind of dreading when some of these characters were going to go, which is something Final Destination has never done for me. But because it is a Final Destination film and you know these characters are going to go, you want them to go in gruesome, horrific, but creative ways. And Bloodlines delivered on that in aces. There are some sequences in this film that I will never get out of my mind. I mean, the MRI sequence is one of the craziest things I've ever witnessed in film, especially in horror. But while this isn't usually my cup of tea, I had a great time with Final Destination Bloodlines, and I think it's what the franchise needed to feel fresh and unique again. Number 7, The Accountant 2. I really like Ben Affleck's first The Accountant film, but it's not one that I go and revisit very often. Accountant 2 took everything I kind of liked about The Accountant and just kind of dialed it up to 11, where now we've got John Berthwall and Ben Affleck teamed up as brothers, which I always loved their relationship in the first film. The fact that we get to see that extended and see more of it expanded in this sequel, I thought was a very pleasant surprise. I love the way they play off of each other. The story this time around I thought was a little bit more interesting and a little bit more just engaging for me than the first film. It had more emotional stakes to it than the first film did for me, and the action here was also improved. It was better than the first film. The humor was improved. The camaraderie, the banter between Ben Affleck and John Berthwall was improved from the first film. Everything just kind of felt like it was better, more enjoyable, more entertaining, and action filmed than the first film was. So this is a rare action sequel where I do actually prefer it over the original. Just outside the top 5, The Naked Gun. I like the Naked Gun movies. I love Airplane, and this movie really did harken back to that kind of era of spoof films where Liam Neeson's deadpan humor just works so well in this world. I loved that they had homages to the previous films with Liam Neeson. I love the jokes that they play with that, and I love just how absurd and just crazy it was. It didn't take itself seriously at all, which is what you want from this kind of film. And the humor was just really smart. Like, it was dumb humor, but under the dumbness was really smart writing and really clever jokes. It was a movie that had me laughing continuously. I do think that the laughs run out a little bit in the third act. It starts to overstay its welcome just a little bit. But even in that third act, there's still some real gems of comedy gold that had me just in stitches. And I loved the cast. Paul Walter Hauser in here was also great. Pamela Anderson was fantastic with Liam Neeson. And it was just one of those spoof comedies it's a genre that is seemingly dead. And they were able to bring it back with this film, for better or worse. I guess we'll see as we go on in the future, because more movies are coming out in this genre now. But for the Naked Gun's resurgence, I thought that this is a near perfect way to bring it back in the year of 2025. Kicking off the top 5, Sisu Road to Revenge. I really enjoyed the first Sisu. I think it's a pretty underrated action film. It's a Finnish film. And going back to it in the sequel, it's not a complicated story. It's a very straightforward story. The character speaks no dialogue, and thus you're able to just have carnage and action the entire way through. And I found that Sisu Road to Revenge was more exciting and more action-filled than the first film was. It also had a more personal conflict with the villain that I really enjoyed, and it just was a non-stop action. It was my favorite action movie of the entire year because it just never let you off. It just kept going and going, and the action just got bigger and bigger as it went along. It stayed exciting, it stayed engaging. The staging, the choreography of the action sequences were just fantastic. They were shot very well. They never got dull. And even though it's a movie where the character doesn't speak, you don't really get to know all that much about him verbally, the performance tells you so much about this character, and they're able to get you to root and be on the side of this character so easily, and in a way that's actually very impressive because, like I said, this guy never talks, so we don't really get to know what's going on inside his head. But it's the movement in his eyes, it's the way his face contorts that you understand the story as it's written on his face. And you know that action is about to go down whenever he gets a certain look on his face. And it's the finished John Wick, but it's a great version of it. Number 4, Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. I really enjoy the Knives Out franchise. I did feel like Glass Onion was a little bit of a step down from the first film, though. I really liked it when I first watched it, but on repeat viewings, it doesn't hold up as well for me. But going into Wake Up Dead Man, I was really hoping that Rian Johnson was going to be able to get back to what I liked about Knives Out. And he did that and then some. Because I do feel like Wake Up Dead Man had the best overall mystery of the Knives Out franchise up until this point, where they take about 40 minutes to set up the suspects and the motives that before even Bennett Blanc comes onto the screen, we spend so much time with the people that he will be interrogating and we will be suspecting throughout the story. But they take that time and they fill it with so much information and so much backstory that when the mystery does start to get going, you have pieces to help you fill in the blanks yourself. It doesn't feel like the movie cheats with the mystery by the end of it. It does feel like all the pieces were there for us to solve if we were able to catch them all, which I was not able to do. I was guessing constantly throughout this movie. I was constantly getting things wrong, but I was so engaged. I was so into this movie. Daniel Craig, I think, gave his best performance yet as Bennett Blanc. It does go more serious. It has a bit of a darker tone, but it really works for the mystery that they're selling here. Josh Brolin was also another standout for me in this film. Just fantastic. There was a lot of deep layered themes about faith, about religion that I really found very interesting, that Rian Johnson tackled them in a way that it didn't feel like he was antagonizing any side, atheism, religious. It really did feel like there was this common ground for it all. So there was just a lot in here that I really attached onto. I think it might actually be my favorite Knives Out movie to date. Kicking off our top 3, Fantastic Four First Steps. This is a little bit of a weird one because it is the first in this new Fantastic Four franchise, but because it's in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, all these movies bleed into one another. It is kind of a sequel within the Marvel Cinematic Universe world, so I'm going to include it on this list. And the Fantastic Four have had a very troubled life in the cinematic world. And the question was going to be, can Marvel bring it back to form? Can they make the best Fantastic Four movie that we've ever had? Because that is not a tall bar to clear. So if they don't make the best one, they've failed. And they didn't fail. They did make the best one because they actually made a Fantastic Four movie where it feels like the Fantastic Four are a family. It feels like this is a group that needs each and every single one of them to make the Fantastic Four. That's always kind of been my issue with a lot of the previous Fantastic Four movies, is it never really feels like they're a team that need each other. In this one, it felt like they finally cracked that code to get that feeling across, on top of making it a very exciting and fun intergalactic adventure with the villain of Galactus. I loved the personal stakes for the Fantastic Four as well as the more global stakes for the world, and how their decisions affecting those global stakes turn the world against the Fantastic Four. It gave a really unique dynamic to these characters and the world. The action was fun. They just finally nailed the Fantastic Four on the big screen, made them characters that I would love to see again for the first time, mind you. And I can't wait to see how they continue to evolve, and we see more of them in Avengers Doomsday in the future. But as far as their first outing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe goes, I'm very pleased. I was very happy with this film. Had a complete blast with it. Our runner-up is Thunderbolts. Again, in the MCU, everything is kind of a sequel to one another. So even though this is like the first in the Thunderbolts franchise, although they are later branded the New Avengers, so I guess it's part of the Avengers franchise. But regardless of all that, Marvel has had a pretty rocky road these past couple of years, and I've been waiting for a movie that will bring back the excitement that I had in phases 1, 2, and 3. And Thunderbolts was the film that delivered that, where I feel like Marvel was able to focus up once again with these characters, taking these B and C list characters, a lot of which come from Disney Plus TV shows, putting them on the big screen, forming this group in a way that harkened back to how they used to form groups like the Avengers, like Guardians of the Galaxy back in phases 1 and 2, and did it in a way where it feels needed. It feels like these group of characters really do belong with each other and make a great team. On top of that, they had a lot of messaging and themes about loneliness, about depression. It was about something. It was a Marvel film that had something to say. And the characters that they chose to depict these messages and themes, they all represented them very well and authentically. And I just feel like they took all these characters that were kind of B and C and raised them up in my status. The action was great. It was a more contained, smaller Marvel film. It didn't have end of the world stakes. It just had some personal stakes. It even had a little bit of a subversion of how their third acts usually go, where you still get the big action sequence, but you also get something a little bit more psychological and a little bit deeper than you usually get in Marvel films. I just thought it was great. I thought this was a return to form for the Marvel films on the big screen, and I'm really hoping that Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four are signs that the Marvel train is back on track. Predator Badlands. And Predator Badlands is just such a refreshing take in the Predator world, where they totally took the franchise's formula and template and kind of flipped it on its head by allowing us to follow a Predator this time around in the character of Deck, where they're able to make him relatable but never lose the qualities that we like within a Predator. While it is PG-13, they were able to still have some great action sequences on this alien planet with the Predator, some great world building with the Predator, expanding the Predator lore, expanding the creatures that the Yacha turn out to be in this film. It does become a found family with a lot of heart film for a Predator film, but for me, I liked that. It was something different. It was something new. It gave this movie a real emotional core at the center of it that I always latch onto. And walking out of this film, I just felt like I wanted more of it. I wanted more of Deck. I want a whole trilogy following this character, especially where the film left off. I'm a huge fan of what Dan Trachtenberg is doing with the Predator universe, with Prey, with Killer of Killers, and now with Predator Badlands. And to me, what makes this movie number one is that it did take this franchise that I feel was getting a little bit stale at times, and with each entry, with Prey, with Predator, Killer of Killers, they're showing that there's life to be had in the franchise still. But this is the movie that showed me there's like 10 more years of life in this franchise. There's so much more that they can do with this franchise than what we've been led to believe. They showed it here, they pulled it off here, and for that reason, it comes in as my number one favorite movie sequel of the year 2025. How many sequels did you get to see in 2025? I didn't even mention Tron Ares. I never saw that one. Avatar Fire and Ash went over my head. Comment down below. Let me know all your thoughts and opinions on that, guys. Again, this is a part one of a 4-part series of rankings. So come back tomorrow. We'll be talking about the most disappointing films of 2025. You can check out that video playlist right over there, as well as some other content right down there. It's the most recently uploaded video to the channel. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and don't just watch movies, talk movies. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.